All right, folks, this is Alasdair from Ashenspire, and you're listening to the Brutally Delicious podcast.
Cool, man. I appreciate you taking the time to do this.
No, it's mutually beneficial, I'm sure.
Yeah, I agree. So I guess we could jump right in. For those not familiar with Ashenspire, can you give us like the 2-sentence elevator pitch?
Ashenspire is like experimental, radically politically motivated, vaguely blackened like art music. It's a little pretentious, but the goal is to make music that sounds like the I suppose the political absurdities that it's trying to fight against in a way. Something like that.
Well, that works, and I know I listened to the single "Tragic Heroine," and I've read the bio, but I know you didn't mention it, but there's like a mixture of jazz and black metal and a whole bunch of dissonance going on. How do you think that reflects what we're all going through over the last 2 or 3 years?
Absurdity, I suppose, is one of the key words there, right? Like a really a sound that is unpredictable not without a stable foundation. The music doesn't have that. We certainly feel like we have an unstable foundation. I suppose like a lot of those like experimental elements come from like a lot of that music is where like the boundary pushing is in music at the moment. And all the crazy stuff is or a lot of the crazy stuff is made by a lot of the jazzers and people in weird electronic music and people who are operating on like the fringes of stuff. As to how like all of this relates to our current situation, it needs to feel as stressful and as grating and grinding, relentlessly grinding as the slow decay of Mark Fisher calls it the slow cancellation of the future, which I think is quite an evocative way of describing things. And that's what that music's in service of, I suppose, is creating this oppressive sound world. That's where it's at, I think.
So all of that is intentional then. I mean, you go into the studio or you go into the writing process with the idea of you're going to be dissonant and chaotic, right?
I mean, the music I write just sort of falls out of me a little bit. It's not really like as controlled as all that. I think it's maybe just a reflection of where I'm at, that the music sounds like it does. But say, for example, the vocal delivery, which is one of the things people pick up on as one of the first weird elements, one of the most uncomfortable parts of the music. That is very much just very little preparation, apart from like having the words and phrases that make up most of the lyrics rumbling around my head for the better part of several months before they're recorded, sometimes up to years, and then just going in and delivering them the way that they feel.
Okay.
It's very much a full body like cathartic experience to just like unleash it all. And in that sense, yes, like the intention is to express the feelings surrounding the subject material, and that comes very naturally. I don't really I don't sit and practice the lines over and over again. There's very little in the way of melody that needs to be written. It's mostly just, it just kind of happens, which I think fits the tone of the music quite well.
I do too. And I think this kind of music, and you know, you've stressed the uncomfortableness of it all, but I think, you know, you can relate that to like the 60s and the early 70s, right? Where it was uncomfortable music trying to say something about society at the time. And I think you guys are doing sort of the same thing in maybe a heavier vibe. Does that make sense?
Oh no, totally. And a lot of that music is a lot heavier than the music that's being made now. I mean, King Crimson, Emerson, Lake and Palmer, like these guys were really on the edge of what people were prepared to listen to, certainly, and capable of understanding, at least in the mainstream.
Right.
And those guys were only just like taking on some of the weirder stuff that was being developed in the contemporary classical world as well. So, it's definitely got notes of those sorts of like politically relevant, like uncomfortable music. I think like uncomfortable music for uncomfortable times is like a constant in human history.
Right. So we've skirted around a little bit. I'm just going to go ahead and ask it. Is there something you want your fans to walk away from, or the listener to walk away from, after listening to an Ashenspire record, or even more, you know, importantly, Hostile Architecture, which comes out in a couple weeks, right?
Yeah. With either record that we've had so far, the goal would be for the listener to kind of reflect on their circumstances and sort of question the origins of those circumstances. So for the first record, we were kind of talking about British imperialism and imperialism as a whole in the Western world, and how that informs a lot of the societal conditions that we currently live under.
Right.
And, you know, how that affects other parts of the world. In this one, it's more intimate in a way. It's less grand, and more about the day-to-day experience. So this new record, we're looking to get people to, I suppose, reflect on the material conditions of their everyday life.
Right.
And like how societal structures reinforce those things. And ideally, the listener would come away from listening to a record thinking, how does that relate to me and the way I live my life? Am I like, not all of the lyrics like make total sense to someone who isn't me. But I think the goal with some of them would be like to reflect on like the feeling that they're conveying, the discomfort. And like, I would really like people to go, well, where does this come from for me? What can I attribute within this feeling to the rigid hierarchical institutional structures that surround me on all sides?
Right.
So like just making people aware of the things, the boundaries around their world, I guess, is like is the goal, and then to start questioning them.
So I think, you know, you're writing these in Scotland, and you talked about British imperialism, but I think on the grand scheme, we're all in this fucked up world where, you know, even us over in the States can relate to a lot of what you're saying, because it's pretty screwed up over here as well.
Well, I mean, yeah, no, absolutely. And I think like a lot of the Western world, for want of a better term, will find something that's like relevant because I mean, I'm writing this music, these lyrics from the perspective of a subject under neoliberal capitalism, which of course, the UK and America, North America, are bastions of and have been since the 1980s. So yeah, I think there's a huge amount of relevance to American audiences for sure. Perhaps more so than UK audiences, but
yeah, I don't know how much of the news you get from over here, but we're in a pretty fucked up position at the moment.
yeah, it's all pretty messy everywhere.
Yeah.
That's one of the dangers, I suppose, with making this kind of art and music is dwelling in this world too much. Can be quite intense, I suppose.
However, you mentioned it a minute ago. It's very cathartic, both for the artist and the listener, I think, right? Heavy music has a way of transcending that sort of feeling. And even though it's dark, I think, the listener and the artist take something away from it that's not as dark. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. Like, there's at no point on this album where the goal should be like apathy or giving up or nihilism. That's like the complete opposite of the point of the record. It's designed to be, I don't want to say motivating, that's a little cheesy, but it's like the idea that yes, things are grim, but it's in the little things that you can do in your communities in which you're going to find the power to change things. And part of that community building is in the world of art and music, and that understanding being built between people.
I agree. And so you mentioned it again, but I think, and I say this a lot on the show to other people, but I think, we've gone through 2 years or 3 years of just total nonsense and everything has been shut away and whatever. But I think we're going to see like this crazy artistic renaissance, not just in music, but in like art and all the arts, really, because everybody's been locked away, perfecting their craft and going through this collective, I don't know what you'd call it, but you know what I'm saying? And I think now on the upside of it, you're going to see all this creative renaissance almost.
I think that, there's definitely the possibility for a huge amount of really good art to be coming out. And certainly, lots of it has already come out. Much of the stuff that was, I think, rushed to come out during the pandemic art, if you like, was a little underbaked.
Yes.
We've all seen Zoom theater plays and whatnot,
right?
Like online concerts that don't really do anything with that format, or they sort of just kind of go, oh, isn't it crazy that this is on Zoom or whatever?
Right.
It's gimmicky. But I think the collective traumatic experience that has been, undergoing the absolutely mental last few years will, I suppose the only way that a lot of people will be able to manage and process their experiences of it will be through art. And I always prefer art that has like a really earnest and honest communication of some sort of feeling.
Right.
And given that people are feeling quite a lot, I hope to see more of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you guys planning on taking this out on the road at all, or is it going to be too difficult?
Well, it's always a big stress to like try and get this band moving because there's quite a lot of us. There is a lot of moving parts in all of the music that we make. But yes, we are going out on the road. We're planning no confirmed, or rather, yes, confirmed, not announced dates yet in Germany in October. And we're trying to get into Denmark next year. And then, just trying to like get off of get off of the island, off of Brexit Island.
How difficult is it to play this sort of or to translate this into the live setting? Because like you said, there's a lot of moving parts and a lot of technical parts. Is it really difficult? And do you think about that when you're writing, like, hey, I may not be able to do this live, or?
When I like write music, in terms of like how I approach the performance of it, I will try to write parts that I know I can nail in the studio, basically. And yeah, there's always an element of like pushing oneself to try and just reach that little further, do that little bit extra. But in terms of like individual performance, both myself and the other musicians, I think, will tend to create parts that are, it's better to write something simple that you can nail rather than something complicated that you won't. Right. And like the music is pretty complex and pretty technical in places. But I think a lot of our musicians are extremely, extremely competent, right. Like really, really good at their craft. The difficulty comes really just with arranging everyone into a room and getting the hours in to make sure that it's as tight as possible. And we've been putting a lot of work into that, which of course, because of the past few years has been a very difficult thing to do. But I mean, we played our first show since March 2020, just on Friday there. And it was, I think, a pretty compelling performance, a really good, assurance of that what we're doing is right. And we've got some other bits and pieces. In fact, we've got our album release show coming up at the end of July, and that'll be a really good chance to. We'll be performing the record, and we'll have all the musicians, and that's quite an endeavor to try and get. I think it'll be 7 people on stage, wow. And that's removing some of the instruments. I mean, you're hard pressed to find a hammered dulcimer player, right, who's willing to take part in this sort of thing.
How great was it to be out on stage again after all this time?
I mean, I love performing, and I do it with quite a lot of different bands. With Ashenspire, it felt very much like, oh yes, no, this is right. We were very quiet on stage. That was the major issue. Was that the amps need to be up loud as fuck, right. And they weren't. But that's fine. With that sort of thing taken care of, yeah, no, it feels really good. It's a really, I mean, it's pure personal, like human expression for me in musical form, and so it doesn't get better than that, really.
Right. Were you nervous after being away from the stage for so long?
No, not really. Like I've put a lot of time into it, right, and been gigging quite a lot with other bands. So I was, I suppose, just stressed with organizing things. Right. But the musicians in Ashenspire are like, I trust them to get things right. And yeah, we've put the work in. So I didn't think anything was going to go terribly wrong. And it didn't, although our singer did smash his face open with an SM58. So it's fine. It's all rock and roll.
Yeah, I mean, no Spinal Tap moments though, right?
Exactly.
That's great. So Ashenspire Hostile Architecture is out the 15th. If fans want to find you guys, you pretty active social media. Can you just give us your links?
Yeah, we're on Instagram at Ashenspire_, and then same on Twitter, I think. Facebook. That's about it. I try to.
There's too many of them.
There's a lot of it, and only so many hours in the day.
Yes, I know. I mean, I'm a little in a different boat with the show and all the other stuff I do, but there's only so many things you can keep up with. I know there's a million different ones that keep coming up, and doing it DIY, there's hardly any way to do all of this crap at the same time. But those are the main ones, and you guys are pretty active. Fans want to reach out.
Yeah, we try to keep pretty active. Of course, there's Bandcamp and YouTube and all the rest of it to find the actual music, but to find out what we're doing.
Of course, Bandcamp Fridays, they can get you guys get all that music, right?
Absolutely.
So head on over there. And I think that's all I've got. That's the end of my questions. Did I miss anything you want to cover?
I think you've been very thorough.
Good. I did the research, and I dig it. It's very different. It takes a little bit of getting used to. I think second or third time I listened to Tragic Heroine, I finally began to really get it. I don't think it's something you put on and just casually listen.
No, it's not easy listening. We've had that back actually a couple of times. We had one review who said, this is a vital record, one of the most important you'll hear in 2022. But it might take a couple of listens to get used to. Yeah, I
agree. And don't take this the wrong way. I don't think it's the record you listen to cruising down the highway doing 75 with the windows down.
It's not Judas Priest.
Yeah, right, correct. But I mean, I dig it. I like what you guys are doing, and I appreciate you, keeping it going.
Thanks very much, man.
That's all I've got, my friend. Thank you for taking the time.
Apologies for having to jump out in the middle there.
I get it, no problem at all. Good luck with the record, and hopefully we see you stateside someday.
Thanks very much, dude. Have a great day.
Be well. Take care. Bye.
See you later.
Ever wonder what a punch from Elton John feels like?
Or how you'd cope with having turned down the chance to be in Nirvana?
Or what signal Keith Richards gives when he wants you to get the hell out of his hotel room?
Fans of Too Much Effing Perspective don't have to wonder, because they've heard these exact stories and a jillion others on our podcast. I'm Alex Hoffman, former tour manager for Radiohead.
And I'm musician and comedy writer Alan Keller. On the TMEP show, we get guests like Nancy Wilson from Heart, Jeremiah Freites from the Lumineers, and Modern Family's Julie Bowen to tell us things they may have only shared with their therapist, clergy, or a TMZ stringer.
So join us on Too Much Effing Perspective. That's EFFING Perspective. The only podcast you crank up to 11.